Previously, I've done a video on Nvidia in which I listed the reasons why $800 price target by 2030 is not very realistic. So in this video, I'm going to talk about more realistic price targets for Nvidia stock by 2030. I'm going to show two cases. One is a bull case and other one is a bear case, which I believe in. Let me first go over the bull case, in which I'm assuming $627 billion of revenue for Nvidia by 2030, and obviously most of it will be AI revenue. Currently they are making $130 billion. For the net profit margin, currently they are making close to 55% because they can list their price, and there are a lot of hyperscalers that are desperate for those chips, and there are a lot of supply chain bottlenecks adding to this issue. So Nvidia has a lot of pricing power now because they are kind of like a monopoly in the discrete GPU sector. So 55% currently is possible, but for 2030, a lot of companies like TSMC, Applied Materials, ASML, etc., they are investing in their supply chain and their capacity of chip manufacturing. So there will not be any scarcity, and the hyperscalers will be less desperate for chips because there is no significant competition by 2030. So that's the assumption at least. So that's why I'm only estimating 40% net profit margin, with which this company would make about $251 billion of net income by 2030. And currently they are commanding a multiple of 55, but by 2030 the growth rate has to decelerate significantly because they are already achieving $600 billion plus of revenue. So I'm assigning a multiple of 45, with which this company would be worth about $11 trillion by 2030. Currently they have close to 25 billion outstanding shares. Since they will have a lot of profit for the next 6 years, they can do buybacks. I'm estimating 2% buyback each year. Don't think that 2% is less because Nvidia is already a $3.5 trillion company. 2% would be almost $70 billion, which is the net profit that Nvidia makes currently. And as the market cap increases, that 2% will increase, and also Nvidia's profits. So 2% buyback I think is reasonable. With that, they will have 21.7 billion outstanding shares by 2030. With that, I'm getting a price target of $520 for Nvidia. Currently, they are close to $138, and that represents almost 277% gain in 6 years. It's almost like a 4x, right? So that's an incredible gain, but this assumes that AI will be a mega success. Obviously, the beneficiaries will be the likes of Microsoft, Amazon, and also Google, right? Because they play in the cloud sector, and if AI is a mega success, a lot of companies and governments around the world will use those cloud facilities, and those stocks will also do well. Let me now move on to the base case, which I believe in. I assume AI will be moderately successful, and if you are an Nvidia bull, you don't want to continue because I'm not going to show great numbers for you. But let me first show you my process for getting the revenue of Nvidia, because Nvidia makes most of their revenue from the top 5 clients, and rest of the revenue is coming from the rest of the world or the rest of the companies. And since AI will be a success, moderate success by 2030, I'm estimating that almost 80% of their revenue will come from the top 5 or 6 players, and then 20% will be contributed by the other companies in the world. So Microsoft, what I have done here is currently in 2024 they're making a $90 billion of net income, and by 2030 the CEO Satya said he can double their revenue to $500 billion, and we know their net profit margins are in the order of 35%, so they'll make about $180 billion of net income by 2030. And Nvidia is a cloud provider, so they have to have a general purpose GPU because they do not know what their client's workload is. So they are forced to buy from Nvidia. At least that's my assumption. So I'm estimating 50% of their net income will go towards the capex. We have to understand that Microsoft also has a stock, and for the past 1 year it hasn't moved. The S&P 500 actually beat Microsoft by a significant margin. So they also have pressure. They cannot just have all their net income pulled and put back into capex, right? So that's why I'm estimating 50% of the net income will go into the capex. And for Meta, we know that they have a specific workload. They probably work on text to build their large language model like Llama, right? They may also work on video, or they may also work on images. So they also can do that with XPU. In fact, they are actually partnering with Broadcom to develop those XPUs which are much cheaper, that are aimed at a particular workload, and they also consume less electricity. So for Meta, I only assume 30% of our net income will go towards the capex for GPUs for Nvidia, right? So that's why I have currently estimated $130 billion of net income for Meta in 2030. Currently, they are at 55 billion. Okay, so I have done those valuations separately. I'm not going to share all of those here because that's going to make this video super long. So Alphabet, they have partnership with Broadcom, and they are projected to make $180 billion of net income, and almost 30%, which is 55 billion, will come towards Nvidia, right? So I also have Amazon and Tesla and Grok. Tesla, I'm estimating $100 billion of net income by 2030. Currently, they're at 12 billion, right? So you can look at my Tesla valuation video for 2030 if you are curious. So overall, it comes down to $370 billion. So I estimated others will contribute to about $75 billion. So my process is Nvidia will get their revenue from 4 or 5 players, majority, and then 20-30% will come from the rest of the companies, right? So if they make money, Nvidia will make money. You and me will not buy a discrete GPU from them, right? So that's my assumption. So 370 billion, which is also a significant number, by the way, 370 billion, because currently they are making 130 billion, and I'm estimating 18% growth rate. So that 370 billion capex, I'm estimating 95% of that will come to Nvidia. Rest of the 5% will go to the players like AMD, right? So 370 times 95% will get me $351 billion. I'm estimating a net profit margin of 35% because AI is a moderate success, right? So there will not be tremendous demand. So Nvidia cannot command a high price for their GPUs. Their margins are going to fall. So with 35% net profit margin, they'll get $123 billion of net income by 2030. I'm only estimating a multiple of 40 because they will become a mature company by then, and the growth rates will have to reduce significantly. So people can pay a multiple of close to 40, in my opinion. With that, they will be close to $5 trillion of market cap by 2030. And I'm still keeping the 2% buyback, with which they'll have 21.7 billion outstanding shares. So when I divide the 4.9 trillion with 21.7 billion outstanding shares, I get a stock price of $226. Currently they're at $138. So that's about 64% gain in 6 years, which will beat the index, but it's not a good gain.